quick demo of this tutorial. In this video, we will discuss how to upload images in Reactjs through ASP.NET Core WebAPI. We will be demonstrating how to upload images, retrieve and delete images like an image gallery in React with WebAPI. So I'm sure you will find this tutorial helpful for your upcoming React or .NET Core projects. So please watch till the end of this tutorial. Hi all, welcome to CodAffection. Before starting this video, I would like to ask you a favor. If you find this video helpful, please thumbs up this video. If you are new here, please consider subscribing to this channel and click on bell icon to get notification immediately when I upload new videos like this. Most of the video lesson here also has a written blog post. You can find the link in video description and you can grab code from there as well. Without further ado, let's get started with this topic. First of all, I will create an ASP.NET Core Web API for image upload. And then after that, we will build the frontend in React.js. To create the API, here is my Visual Studio 2019. So let's create a new project. Now select ASP.NET Core Web Application. To demonstrate this topic, we will be dealing with employee details. So I will name this project as Employee Register API. Select the location where you want to save this project. Click on Create. Now select this API template here. Click on Create. Now we have a brand new Web API project. We will be saving the uploaded images inside this project directory in a new folder called Images. And the corresponding employee details along with the image name or path will be saved into SQL Server. In order to work with the database, we will be using Entity Framework Core. So first of all, we have to install corresponding NuGet packages. So right click on this project here, then click on Manage NuGet Packages. Then from this Browse tab, we have to search for corresponding packages, Microsoft Entity Framework Core. Now let's install this package here. Here we have installed the package Entity Framework Core. Along with that, we have to install these two packages, SQL Server and Tools. So let's do that. Accept the license. Now let's install the final package, Entity Framework Core Tools. Now that's also done. So we have done with the installation of Entity Framework Core packages. Now let's define the DBModel class. For that, first of all, I will create a new folder here, Models. Let's create a model class for employee model. First of all, we have the primary key for the table, which is employee ID. So I will mark this property with the key attribute. Now let's add remaining properties. Employee name, occupation. Finally, we have image name. Once user upload a new image, we'll be saving that into this project directory as we have mentioned, but we'll rename that image with a unique name so that we can avoid duplicate images. That image name will be saved inside this property or column image name. Now let's specify these column types. For that, we can use this attribute column type name is equal to nvarchar 50. Let me copy this and pasting here for rest of the properties here. For now, that's enough for this model class. Now let's create a DB context class. Right click on this images folder, add new class, employee DB context. I will inherit this class from DB context. Now let's add the constructor here with this parameter DB context options of the type employee DB context as options. Along with this constructor, we have to call the parent class constructor also. For that, we can use this keyword base. Into that, we can pass this same options parameter. As you already know, the DB context class in Entity Framework decide what should be there in actual physical DB. So if we want to create a table for this employee model class, we have to have a DB set property for the model. So let's add that here, DB set of the type employee model class as employees. So there will be a table called employees. Now everything for database is configured except the connection string, which is to be passed into this constructor employee DB context here through this parameter DB context options. For that, we'll be using dependency injection in ASP.NET Core. We have already explained how dependency injection works in ASP.NET Core, even though I will explain it here in brief. We can do the dependency injection inside this startup class here. We will do that inside this configuration services method here. So services.add DB context function can be called, which is of the type employee DB context. So with this statement here, we are trying to create an instance of employee DB context class. So we have to pass the value for this constructor here. It should contain two informations, like there should be a DB provider, meaning it can be either SQL Server, MySQL, PostgreSQL, etc. So we have to specify the DB provider. Along with that, we have to provide the connection string also. So I will define this arrow function here with this parameter options. Options dot use SQL Server function can be called for specifying the DB provider as SQL Server. Into this function, we have to pass the connection string. We will be saving that inside this JSON file app settings here. In order to access that, we can do this configuration dot get connection string function can be called. Into that, we have to pass the connection string name. It will be something like dev connection. Now let's define this connection string inside this JSON file here, app settings. We will be adding a new element, connection strings. Inside that, we can add the connection with this key dev connection. For now, I will paste the connection string of the DB that we are going to create through Entity Framework Core DB migration. We will be creating a new employee DB inside this SQL Server instance. If you are struggling with your DB connection string, I have already made a video on that. You could check that from video description. I always recommend you to check the video description for related videos or article. Okay, so that's it. We have done with the DB connection details. I will explain how this dependency injection works once we create a controller inside this project. Before that, let's execute DB migration commands. So first of all, we have to build this project here. In order to execute DB migration command, we have to open Package Manager console. In my case, you could already see the Package Manager console here. If you can't see this console window, just select this project from Solution Explorer, then go to Tools, then NuGet Package Manager console, then Package Manager console. Make sure you have selected the exact project from this drop down here. First of all, we have to execute this command, add migration. Then name this migration here. I will name it as initial create. Hit enter. As a result of this command execution, you could see a new folder called migrations with respective C# files here. Now, finally, we have to execute one more command, update database. We are done with migration commands. Let's check whether we have created the database or not. So here is my management studio. Let's expand this databases here. You could see the new DB here. If you can't see that, just select this databases folder, then hit this refresh button here. Now let's check whether we have created the employees table here. So here it is. Let's check its design. As you can see, this table is created as per our DB model here. Now back to the WebAPI project here. Now let's create a controller for this model. Before that, let's build this project. After successful build, right click on this controllers folder, add controller, select this template, API controller with actions using Entity Framework. Model will be employee model, employee DB context. I will name this controller as employee controller. Click on add. As a result of scaffolding mechanism, here is our employee controller with all of the required web methods. We will be discussing each of these web methods once we consume them from our React application. Before that, I want to explain how dependency injection works inside this application. From our startup class here, with this function called addDBContext, the framework will create instance of employee DB context with this DB provider and connection string. Now, whenever we make requests into these employee controllers here, an instance for this employee controller will be created. As you can see, this controller has a constructor with this employee DB context. The value for this constructor parameter of the type DB context will be passed from this ASP.NET Core dependency injection here, which is automatically managed by the framework itself. So the rest of the web methods inside this controller will be using this property to interact with the DB. For now, I will conclude this WebAPI part for image upload. I will be updating these web methods in various stages of the app development. Now let's design the client-side app in React with an employee form for uploading employee profile images. So let's create the React app inside this folder directory here. So first of all, we have to open command prompt from this same folder directory. For that, you can use this shortcut. Inside this directory here, just type cmd, then hit enter. And thereby we have opened this command prompt from the same folder directory here. Now to create a React app, you can execute this command npx create React app. The name of the application, it would be employee register client. Hit enter. Finally, here we have successfully created the React app. As a result of that, you could see the new folder here. Now let's navigate inside the project folder, which is employee register client. In order to develop this application, I will be using Visual Studio Code Editor. For that, you can use this command code space period. So here we have our brand new React application. First of all, let me run this application. For that, let's open one terminal and then let's execute this command npm start. So this is how the fresh React app looks like. As you know, inside a React application, we will be having a root component, which is here app.js. This default div here is responsible for the default view of the application here. Now let's add components for employee. I will be creating a new folder here, components. Now let's add the parent component, employee list. Inside that, we will create a functional component using this React snippet RFC, React functional component. Like this, we need one more component for designing the form. I will name it as employee. Now let's define the functional component here. Let's start with this index.html here. Here we have the HTML declaration with head and body part. All of the components inside this application will be displayed by replacing this root div here. In order to design this application, I will be using Bootstrap. So first of all, let's grab corresponding style sheet reference. So go to the official website getbootstrap.com. Now let's copy this CSS reference and then I will paste that inside this head tag here. We will be using font over some icons also. So let me copy corresponding style sheet also. CDN for font over some. Usually I copy the CSS reference from this website here, cdnjs.com. I will copy this reference for all.min.css file here. Let's paste that here. I would like to apply the Google font Roboto inside our application. So let's grab corresponding style sheet also. So here is our font Roboto. Let's select frequently used font weights from here. Then from this embed tab, you could copy the link reference. I will paste that inside this index.html here. Then we can apply the font using this CSS rule here. So let me copy this. Here is our global style sheet index.css. Here application already used some default fonts. I will replace that with the copied CSS rule. Now back to the root component app.js. First of all, I will get rid of these default divs from here. Now here we have the div container from Bootstrap. We don't need this default React logo reference. Inside this container div here, we want to show this parent component employee list. For that, we can add this tag employee list. If you select this option from auto suggestion, corresponding import statement will be added here. Now rest of the development can be done inside these two components, employee list and employee. Now starting with this parent component employee list, first of all we will be using Bootstrap grid system. So we will be having this row div. Inside that we will be having two columns. So class name is equal to Core MD4. Let me copy paste this below. Now rest of the 8 columns can be applied to this second div here. Inside this first div here, we can show this component employee, where we have to design a form for employee containing image upload. Inside the second div here, we will be showing a list of employee records. Now inside this employee component here, we will be designing a employee form. Now this is how the application looks like. We have two Bootstrap columns for employee form and list of employees. Now about these two divs here, I want to show app heading. For that, we'll be using Jumbotron component from Bootstrap. So I will copy this code block from here. Let's paste that here inside another div. Class name is equal to call MD12. We don't need this para here, so let me remove that from here. Now let's name this application to something employee register. Now this is how the app header looks like. Here we have some extra padding and we want to center this app header here. So I will apply this Bootstrap class padding on vertical axis of the range 4. In order to center this element, we can use this Bootstrap class text center. Now let's design this employee form here. We will do that inside this component employee here. Now let's enter into Zen mode so that you can see properly what I'm typing here. For that, you can use the shortcut Ctrl+KZ. If you want to see the shortcuts on your IDE, you can use this shortcut here, Ctrl+KS. And then just type Zen mode. Here you can see the key binding Ctrl+KZ. So hold Ctrl, then press K, then Z. In Zen mode, we can hide everything other than the editing file. Now let me increase this font size here. Now let's add the form here, form. Now to prevent previously posted form data from input controls like auto suggestion or autocomplete, we can add this attribute here, autocomplete, as off. And then to avoid default HTML5 validation, we can set this property no validate. Now you could see this red squiggly line here. Inside a React component return statement, it only allows one parent outer element. Here we have two elements, this form and div. In order to avoid this problem, we will enclose them with this element React fragment. Okay. Just about this form here, I want to show a heading. So I will add this class name here, container text center. Inside that, let's have this para with this class lead from Bootstrap. We will just display this an employee. Now inside this form here, let's start adding our input controls. I will be showing input controls inside this Bootstrap element card. So first of all, we need this div with this class card. Inside that, we need another div like this. So let me copy paste this with this class body. Now in order to manage input control values, we will be adding a component state property. We will do that with the help of React hook functions. So let's import that up here, use state and use effect. Now let's define a component state object, values and corresponding set function set values. And we can initialize that with this function use state. To initialize this object, I will be defining another object here, initial field values. Now let's add properties for each of the controls that we are going to add inside this form here, like we have mentioned inside the WebAPI project here. First of all, we have employee ID. Initially I will set it as 0. Then we have employee name as empty string, and then we have occupation, and then we will have this exact property image name that we used to have inside our WebAPI model here. So here it is, image name as empty string, and then we need a property image source. Inside this property we will be saving the image source, which is to be shown inside the image preview. For now I will leave it as empty string here, and here is our final property image file, which is the exact file that is selected for upload. Initially I will set it as null here. Now let's pass this object initial field values into this state object values here. Now let's add input controls into this form here. First of all, I will add this div from Bootstrap form group. Inside that we have this input control. Here I will apply this Bootstrap class here, form control. This is for employee name, so I will set the placeholder as employee name. Now we have to set this name property here as employee name. Now inside this control we will be showing the value from our values object that we have created up here. So value is equal to values dot employee name. Like this, we need one more control for occupation. Let me update these attributes accordingly. Occupation values dot occupation. Now when we set value attribute of an input control dynamically like this, we also have to wire up on change event also. So let's do that here. On change is equal to, we will be defining a new function handle input change. Let's apply the same function here also. Now let's define this function here, handle input change, with a single parameter, which is the default event parameter e. The main aim of this function is to update this state property when user change values inside this input control. First of all, we will retrieve the value from this control. So we will extract the name along with the value. We can access that from this default parameter here, e.target. Inside an onChange event, this e.target object represents the corresponding input control. From that, we can retrieve these properties name and value. Now we just need to set this current value inside the corresponding property inside values state object. For that, we can call this function set values. Into that, we will be passing an object. We just need to update this property name is equal to value. So this will be replaced with the corresponding property from which this onChange event is triggered. Into that property, we have set the current value from the control. And rest of the properties inside this values object should be there as it is. So we have to apply this separator operator with the values object. Now let me save this and back to the application here. So here we have the input controls for employee name and occupation. Now let's add a file uploader for image. For that, I will add a new div here with this class form group. Now let's add the input control, which is of the type file. Here we only need to accept a file of the type image, so image/star. Now let's apply this Bootstrap class here, form control file. So here we have the image uploader. When users select an image for upload, we have to show the corresponding image preview. For that, I will be adding a new img control just above this card body here. So here it is, img src is equal to, we can access that from our property up here, image source, values.image source. I will set this bootstrap class here, card image top. By default, this property img source is an empty string. We have to set a predefined image when there is no image selected for upload. First of all, let me escape from this Zen mode. So press escape twice. Now I will be adding a new folder img to store the default image. I have already prepared a default image which is here. So let me drag the same into this folder here. Now inside this employee component, let me create a new property, default image source. Let's save the relative path of the image here. Now we can set the same here. Now back to the application here. Here we have the default image when there is no selected image for upload. Now when users select an image for upload, we have to show the corresponding image preview inside this img control here. For that, let's wire up a new function into this file uploader on change event. So back to the Zen mode, hold Ctrl, then press K, release both keys, press Z. So here we have the event on change is equal to show preview. Now let's define this function up here. Here we have the default event parameter E. First of all, we will check whether we have an image selected for upload. We can check that with this if statement here, e.target. As we have mentioned inside this handle input change function here, this e.target will be representing the corresponding input control from which on change event is triggered. For an input control, there will be an array files. Inside that, we'll be having the selected image for upload. First of all, we will check whether we have this array or not, and we will check whether the first element inside the array is occupied or not. So first of all, I will define this property image file. Inside that, let's show the image selected for upload. Now to show the selected image preview, we have to have the corresponding image virtual path which can be updated into this img source file here. For that, we have to define a file reader. Reader is equal to, we will create an instance of file reader. This class is already defined in JavaScript. Now we will wire up onload event here, onload. So here is the function. We can complete its definition in a bit. In order to trigger this event onload, we just need to call this function reader.read as data URL, and thereby we will get the virtual URL of the selected file. Now into this function, we just need to pass this selected or uploaded image. Now to retrieve the corresponding URL, let's complete this function here. We will update the URL to this values object. So we just need to call this function setValues, and inside that we will have this object. We just need to update these two properties here, img source, which is the URL for the file, and the exact file selected for upload will be there inside this property image file. So image file is equal to image file, which is defined here. In short, we just need to pass image file here. Now let's set this property image source. We can access that from this onload event parameter x.target.result. So with this statement, we'll update the corresponding properties. Rest of the properties should be there as it is. So let's apply them here, values. Let me save this and back to the application here. Let's select an image for upload. Boom. Here we have shown the image preview selected for upload inside our React app. Let's try. let's try other images also. The selected image name will be shown along with this choose file button here. There is one more case. Once users select an image for upload and then he or she click on this choose file button here and then cancel this window. Along with this button you could see this no file chosen. In order to handle this situation, I will be adding an else block here. And I will just copy this set values function. In here we will just reset these properties image file and image source. Default image source. Let me save this. Let's check whether it is working or not. Let me cancel this. That's it. I'm sorry for interfering. Let's get straight to the point. As a developer, you already know big projects or lengthy tutorials like this requires a lot of work and time in making. So here I'm asking for your little financial support. It will definitely motivate me to bring more and more helpful and quality free tutorials like this in front of you. Hope we can learn and grow together like this. Please check out various payment methods for donation from video description, or you could shop with our Amazon affiliate links without paying any extra penny. Now let's submit this form here. For that we have to add a submit button. So I will add that here. First of all, let's enter into Zen mode. Here is our form group div. I want to center this button, so I will add this class here. Here is the button. Type is equal to submit, and we have to apply these bootstrap classes btn and btn lite. Inside the button we have to show this text submit. Now here is our button submit. I think we have centered this app title here. Let's check that. Sorry, here we have an incomplete class, and instead of class we have to use class name in React. So let me replace that here. That's it. Here we have centered the app title. Now let's wire up a function for this form submit event. So on submit is equal to handle form submit. Now let's define this function up here. Here is our default parameter e. Inside that, first of all, we have to prevent the default behavior of a form submit event, which is reloading of the page after form submit. We have to prevent that, so we can call this function here prevent default from the parameter. Now actually when we submit this form here, we have to make a post request into our ASP.NET Core Web API project. We can do that in a bit. Before that, we have to implement a simple validation here. Here we have the if clause, and we will be calling this function validate. We have not yet defined this function. We will do that. Let's define the function here. This is a function without any parameter. Inside this function, first of all, I will create this object here. Inside this form, we have two validations, which are this employee name should be mandatory, and there should be an image selected for upload other than this default image. So back to the application, let me increase this font size a little bit. First of all, we have employee name, and here we will check the value from this state object. If employee name is equal to an empty string, then corresponding input field is invalid. So I will set this validation as false for the control, otherwise we will set as true. And here is our second and final validation. We will set that to this property here, image src. Here we will check the value inside the image source. If it is equal to a default image, then we can say there is no image selected for upload. So I will reset the field as false, otherwise we can pass true. Now in order to save these errors, I'm going to define one more state object here, errors and set errors. Now let's initialize that with an empty object. Now inside this validate function, after validating each of these fields, we have to save the validation errors inside the state object. So we can call this a setErrors function. Into that we can pass this temp object. And finally, from this function we have to return a boolean value indicating whether the form as a whole is valid or not. So I will do this, return, and then we can call this function object.values. So it will return an iteratable object containing all of the values inside this object. Through that we have to iterate with this function inside that we have this condition. If all of the values inside the object is true, then we can say this form as a whole is valid. So we have done the validation. Now we have to show validation errors to respective controls here. For that, first of all, I want to add a CSS rule in our style sheet here. So which is here, index.css. So here it is. For input controls of the type text, we just need to set the border color. But for file uploader, we have these styles here. It will just set the text color as red. Now we just need to, now back to the employee component. For that you can use this shortcut, hold tab, then it will show all of the open file in the IDE. So here is our component employee. Now in order to apply this invalid field class into error fields, we can have this function here, apply error class. We have a single parameter for the function. Now before completing this function definition here, let me show you where we call this function. We have to append the class into this attribute class name conditionally. So first of all, I will enclose this attribute value with a pair of curly braces, and we can call the function here apply error class. Into this field parameter we have to pass the corresponding property that we have used for saving error indication. So in case of file upload, which is image source, so I will be using that here, image source. Inside this function we will be having a return statement only, so we have to enclose them with a pair of parentheses, and inside this brackets we will be defining a function. If it is true, we will be returning the class invalid field. In order to separate this class from already applied class here, we have to add this space here. If there is no error, we will return an empty string here. So here is our condition. First of all, we will check whether that property is present inside the errors object. And we have one more condition. We will check the value of the property. If it is false, we can say this field is invalid, and thereby we will apply this class. Now we have to do the same for our employee name control also. So I will just replace this class name attribute value here. Form control, instead of image source we have to pass employee name. Now let me save all of these modifications and back to the application here. Now let me submit this form without feeding any of the value. Boom. So here we have the error validation for both of the controls, file uploader and this employee name control. Let me enter something inside this control here. Submit this form again. Now we only have the validation error for this file uploader. Let me select one image. Submit the form. Now we don't have any error. This form as a whole is valid. Now inside this form submit event, we have to make a post request into our existing .NET Core Web API project. In order to make such a post request, first of all we have to create an object of form data. So let's do that here. Form data is equal to new form data. Now into this object we can append data that we want to send with the post request. So first of all we can call this append for the primary key, which is employee ID. Into that we can pass the value from this values object, employee ID. Now let me copy paste this line for rest of the properties. Employee name, occupation, image name, And finally, we have image file, which is the file selected for the upload. We have not yet used this property image name. It will be required for update operation. Now we can make the post request with this form data object. We will be making all of the API requests from our parent component here, employee list. For that, first of all, I will create the function here for both insert and update operation through form submit. So here is the function add or edit. For this function, we need two parameters, form data, and then a callback function on success, which is to be called after successful insert or update operation. So here is the function add or edit. Inside this function, we will consume the WebAPI methods for image insert or update operation. Now we have to pass this function into our child component here. Add or edit is equal to add or edit. We can access this function from our child component here through props parameter. So here is our component employee, and we can add this props parameter here. From that, we can extract the function add or edit. So all of the values that we have passed from parent can be accessed with this parameter props. Now inside the form submit event here, we can call the function add or edit. We will pass the form data as a first parameter. As a second parameter, we will pass this function reset form, which can be called after successful operation inside the function here. Now inside this new function reset form, we can clear form controls. In order to clear form controls inside the form, we just need to clear this object values, since we have binded all of the controls values from this object values. In order to clear that object, we just need to call this set function set values, and inside that we can pass this initial field values object where we have the default values for the controls. This is not enough to clear this file uploader here. We have to do that separately. There are many ways to do that using a reference or key attribute, etc. But the best way would be using the plain JavaScript method. So I will set this ID attribute for this control here, image. We can clear this field separately inside this reset function here. So document dot get element by ID. Here we have to pass the ID. So here we have the particular DOM element. From that, we just need to set this property value as null. Apart from reinitializing form controls, we want to clear this errors object also. For that, we can call this set errors function with an empty object. So here it is. Now rest of the job for insert operation can be done inside this parent function add or edit. So back to the parent component here, employee list. Now here we have to make the post request to .NET Core WebAPI project for image upload. For that, we'll be using the npm package Axios. So let's install that. Let me open the terminal here. npm I for install, S for save, Axios. Finally, here we have completed with the package installation. Now let's import the same here. From Axios, we will import this Axios object. Now, whenever I work with a web API, I will be defining a function like this. For now, I will just name this function as employee API. For this function, we have a single parameter URL, and we have to pass a default value with the corresponding web API URL here. We can do that in a bit. Inside this function, we have returned 4 functions: fetch, all, create, update, and delete. In order to make a get request using Axios, we just need to call this get method by passing this URL. Post or insert operation along with URL, we have to pass the corresponding form data. In case of update operation, we have to make the put request, and we'll be passing corresponding ID which is to be updated and the updated record object. And for delete operation, we just need to make the request by appending this ID into the URL. We will be calling all of these functions in our application in a bit. Now we will make this post request for image upload along with inserting corresponding employee details. So let's call the function here employee API. We don't have to pass value for this URL. We will be using default value with the corresponding web API URL. From return functions, we'll be calling this create function here. Into this function, we have to pass the form data. If this request is successful, we can handle the callback functions inside this then function here. Inside that, we have this callback function with a single parameter response. Inside the function, first of all, we can call this onSuccess function. From our child component, we have passed reset function into this onSuccess function. So this then function will be invoked when this request is successful. If there is something went wrong, we can catch that error with this catch function here. Here we have the single parameter error. We'll console that object into browser console. Now we have done everything inside this React app to just try our post request. We have to do a few more things inside our WebAPI core project here. With our post request, we will be consuming this WebAPI method here. Since we are making this post request with a form data, we have to use a separate attribute before this model here. We have to add this attribute from form. Now let's check what are the properties that we have inside this employee model here. Now let's compare that with the form data here. There is no property corresponding to this image file inside our WebAPI model here. So let's add that here. With this property, we have to receive image files. So this should be of the type iForm file. I will name it as image file. This is not a property corresponding to SQL Server column. So we have to ignore that mapping in future. So we have to mark this as not mapped. Now you may have this doubt. These properties are in camel casing and that of this model here is Pascal casing. As per C# naming convention, we have to use Pascal casing for properties like this. And when it comes to JavaScript frameworks or libraries, we will be using camel casing. So whenever we make a GET request into WebAPI project, the return result properties will be in camel casing. So whenever data sent outside this WebAPI project, Pascal case properties will be converted into camel casing. For example, here we have employee name. Employee is a word, name is another word. Each of the words first letter should be in uppercase. Rest of the characters should be in small letters. For the same property, the camel casing representation would be like this: employee name. Each of the words first letter must be in uppercase except the first word. So it's like a camel from side view. So when data sent out of WebAPI, properties will be converted into camel case representation. When data is received through parameters like post, put, etc., the camel cased properties will be converted into Pascal case. So that's what happens here. Here we have camel cased properties. It will be binded to these properties, since all of these properties is the exact Pascal casing representation of these properties here. Hope you understood. Let me know if there is any difficulty. Now back to our employee controller here. Back to the post web method here. With these two functions, add and save changes, Entity Framework will insert a new record into our employees table. And as a response to the request, here we have called this created add action. It will return newly inserted object details. We don't need that. We just need to return this status code 201 representing the insert operation is successful. This will be enough if there is no image or file to be uploaded, but we have an image to be uploaded. So first of all, we have to save that image into our Web API directory here. So first of all, I will make a new folder here called images. Now to save the selected image, I will be defining a separate method here, which is not a web method. So I will mark that with this attribute non-action. So here is the method public string. From this function, we'll be returning a name for the uploaded image. Save image. For this method, we have two parameters. I form file as image file, and then HTTP context as HTTP context. I will explain why we need this parameter of the type HTTP context. First of all, we will generate a unique name for the selected image, which is required when there is a chance of duplicate files. So image name is equal to, first of all, we have to retrieve the name of the file without extension. So we can use this class path get file name without extension. Into this function, we can pass the file name. So file name. From that file name, we just need to return the first 10 characters. So we can call this take function, and this function returns IEnumerable. So let's call this function with 10 characters, and we have to convert that enumerable collection to an array. So let's call this function to array. So all of the characters inside the file name will be there in each of the array index. To convert this array into a string, we will call the string constructor here. In image names, there are chances for white space, so better replace them with a hyphen. We will replace space with an hyphen like this. So inside this property, we have the first 10 characters from the file name. Now to make this image name unique, we will append the current time from server. So we could do this datetime.now, and we will convert the current time with this format YYMMSSFFF, year, month, second, and microseconds. And finally, we have to append the file extension. So we'll be calling getExtension function here. So inside this variable, we'll be having a unique file name. Now I will create another variable, image path. Inside that, we have to pass the exact local file directory path for the image. For that, we need the local file directory path up to this images folder. Actually, I was planning to access that from this parameter HTTP context. There is a better way for that. Let me remove this from here, and back to this constructor, we can use dependency injection. We will be adding one more property for dependency injection, iWebHostEnvironment as host environment. For this property also, we have to create a private property like we have done for DB context. You could see this hint here. Expand that, then click on this option here, create an initialize field host environment. Click on that. So here we have the corresponding property, private property, and which is initialized here. I just want to prefix private properties with underscore, so I will just do this. So value for this host environment parameter will be passed from ASP.NET Core framework itself through dependency injection. We don't have to do anything else. Back to the function here. To retrieve the base path for this images folder here, we just need to do this host environment dot content root path. Into that, we can combine this image name. So we can call this function path dot combine. So first parameter, we have the base path. Into that, we have to combine this folder name images. Inside that, we have to create this image with this name, image name. Now to save this image file with this path here, we will have this using statement here. Inside that, we can have this file stream is equal to new file stream. As a first parameter, we can pass this image path and the mode, which is create. We have to create this image. So file mode dot create. Inside this using block, we could do this image file dot copy to async, and we just need to pass the file stream here. Here we have an async function, so we have to add the avoid keyword here. So this whole function becomes async function. So let's add the async keyword here also. Since this function is an async function, we have to wrap this return statement with task. I would say this is one of the main concept of this tutorial for uploading images into .NET Core Web API project. Now let's call this function inside this post web method here. Before inserting the record into SQL Server, we have to update corresponding image name here. So we just need to call this function save image. Into that, just pass this image file, which can be accessed from this property image file here. Since this is an async function, let's add the avoid keyword here. So it will just wait for this function to complete its processing. Now let's run this application without debug mode. So here we have started our Web API project. In order to make a post request to this web method here, we have to append API/employee. Let me copy this base path from here, and let's update that inside our parent component Axios request method here. And we have to append this API/employee. Now let's submit this form here. Select an image, employee name, occupation. Now before submitting this form, let's open Dev Console. Now submit the form. I was expecting this error has blocked by course policy. This is a feature in a Web API project by which it will block requests from another application which is hosted in a different domain or port number. In this case, these two applications are running in different port number, and that's where this violation happens, course policy. To avoid this problem, we have to enable course inside this Web API project for this URL 3000. So back to Web API project, we have to install one more NuGet package for this. So right click on project, manage NuGet packages. Let's install corresponding package, Microsoft ASP.NET Core course. Let's install this. After successful installation, back to our startup class here. Inside this configuration services function, we have to enable this feature. So call this function add course. Now inside this configure function, we have to enable course for this port number 3000. So we could do this app.use course function can be called. Inside the function, we could pass these options dot with origin. We have to enable course for this URL. So let me copy this and paste in here. And make sure to avoid the last /. We have to allow all of the methods like put, post, delete, etc. So call this function allow any method. So we have to enclose this in double quotes. Allow any method and allow any header configuration. So we have done with course configuration. Build this project again to reflect new updates. After successful build, back to the React app. Now let's clear previous error messages. Now let's submit this form again. That's it. Since form is reset to its initial state, hope everything went successful. Let's check that inside our Web API project here. Let's expand this images folder. So here we have the image for Ava. Now let's check whether we have a corresponding employee record in our SQL Server table. Boom! We have inserted a corresponding record for the employee with the saved image name, which is the same file name that we have created within this function save image. So we have successfully uploaded an image with our React application through ASP.NET Core Web API project. Now let's retrieve uploaded image along with corresponding record back to React from our WebAPI project. We have the corresponding image inside this folder images. Now you may expect to see this image with this URL, something like /images/ the name of the image. So let me copy this. But here we are getting 404 error. In order to display uploaded images back to React application, we have to do additional configuration in our WebAPI project. We will be discussing that in next video, along with retrieving all of the images and displaying them like an image gallery in our React project like this. And we have to implement update and delete operation. I will post this project GitHub repository in next video description. As always, if you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video, and for more awesome videos like this, please be subscribed to this channel CodAffection. Please share this video with your friends and colleagues so that they can benefit from this. See you in next part of this tutorial.